Good day. Welcome to the Canadian Anti-Semitism Education Foundation's web talk with Hen Mazzig, our third speaker in our series, Fighting Back, Responses to Jew Hatred. I'm Andrea Spindle, Executive Director of CAEF and the moderator for today's program. CAEF is a registered Canadian charitable organization that promotes awareness about anti-Semitism in all its guises, especially that of anti-Zionism. Since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, instances of Jew hatred across the globe have escalated in quantity and severity. It seems two pandemics were triggered at the same time, one affecting global health and one affecting the Jewish world, that of the virus of anti-Semitism. CAEF moved from hosting in-person experts on the subject to hosting experts virtually, and this has attracted attention globally. We're pleased to welcome people from many different countries, and thank you for joining us and for also subscribing to our weekly bulletin, which has calls for action, directing our readers to taking a stand in combating Jew hatred. I would like to thank James Slavins for sponsoring today's web talk and express our sincerest appreciation for a host of co-sponsors, including Addith Israel Congregation, Americans for Peace and Tolerance, Americans for a Safe Israel, the Atlanta Israel Coalition, the Canadian Institute for Jewish Research, Club Z, Combat Anti-Semitism Movement, Doctors Against Racism and Anti-Semitism, End Jew Hatred Canada, the European Lawyers for Israel, Hezbollah Fellowships, the International Christian Embassy Jerusalem, Muslims Facing Tomorrow, Jewish Resistance, the Ludger Synagogue, Beit Raim Synagogue, the Mattathias Project, North Carolina Coalition for Israel, Rhode Island Coalition for Israel, and the Israel Committee of Sonoma County, California. We greatly appreciate this wonderful group of sponsors. In addition, please consider making a donation, large or small, to CAEF to assist us in continuing to provide quality programs and significant advocacy for our people. Be an unapologetic Zionist and donate at www.caef.ca. Anti-Semitism cannot be taken lightly. It is proving increasingly more and more difficult to stem the tide, whether occurring at universities, as we saw last week with the adoption of a BDS resolution by the U of T Student Union, or within the public school system with multiple examples of teachers in Ontario promoting an anti-Israel narrative while supposedly defending Palestinian Arab rights, a topic not at all within the mandatory curriculum of any grade level, or the scrawling of graffiti on synagogues, Jewish cemeteries, schools, and more recently on federal buildings in Ottawa. These are daily reminders that we can't be casual about protecting our liberties, standing up against Jew hatred, coordinating the safety and security of our Jewish communities, and educating everyone about the evils of such hatred. Instances of Jew hatred abound and seem boundless. Hen Mazzig is a recognized Israeli writer, columnist, and speaker who has inspired Jews around the world, especially young people, who hear his positive message about Israel and its diversity. He is the son of Mizrahi Jewish refugees from Iraq and Tunisia. He is a top LGBTQ influencer, and he served in the IDF for 5 years, becoming a commander while being openly gay. During his service as a lieutenant in the, and I have to ask him exactly what it stands for, the COGAT unit, he worked as an intermediary between the Israel Defense Forces, the Palestinian Authority, the United Nations, and many NGOs that operate in Judea and Samaria. His unit was responsible for overseeing the construction of medical facilities, schools, environmental projects, roads, water-related infrastructure, and security coordination with the Palestinian security forces, which are part of the PA. Hen's award-winning articles have been published in many US and Israeli media, including the LA Times, Newsweek, The Forward, and Jewish Chronicle. He is also a freelance consultant helping to support pro-Israel causes and also LGBTQ issues. On January 6th, an article by Hen appeared in the Allgemeiner that bore the title we have used for this webinar. It's not the anti-Semitism your grandparents warned you about. in which he addressed the power of social media as a major influencer and source of news for young people. In describing the need to stop online anti-Semitism, he sparked a lot of discussion and inspiration. It gives me a great deal of pleasure to introduce Hen Mazzig to present his insights, after which he will take questions from the audience. And I ask that you use the Q&A function to place your questions. This part of the program will be coordinated by Taylor Levy, a fourth-year psychology student at York University in Toronto. Taylor is the Hasbara Fellow and a journalist for Jewish on Campus. She joins us from Toronto, and Hen joins us from England. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Andrea, and thank you everyone for joining us. It's a pleasure to speak to everyone. I know I should have gotten used to it at this point to speak to to a screen, but it's always a challenge for someone that is used to speaking to people directly. So I don't know. I hope you'll get the jokes that I'm going to make, but I won't be able to see it. So my name is Hen Mazzig. Again, I was just introduced, so I'm not going to repeat. I'll tell you a bit about myself, then I'll speak to you a bit about what we're doing at the Tel Aviv Institute, where I work as a senior fellow to fight anti-Semitism online and on social media, and the tools that we're using, giving you some advice on how to do it, hopefully better, or maybe make you think about other tactics and ideas that you can use, and then we'll take Q&A. So a bit about myself. I was born in Petah Tikva, a suburb of Tel Aviv. I grew up in Israel. I grew up in a family of Iraqi mother and Tunisian father. My family, at home, we spoke Arabic, and a specific form of a specific Judeo-Iraqi Arabic was the language that we were speaking. Much like, I guess, Yiddish that was developed in Europe, that wherever Jews live in the diaspora, we develop our own unique Judeo language of the country we live in. Maybe that's an important point. So I'll start with a story to just mention this, and it's something that I find that people really are confused about, because we're talking about empires and we're talking about colonialism, and we're hearing a lot of words being thrown out there. And I was lucky enough and privileged to work with a few scholars from NYU and from Israel, from Oxford. And what I figured is that the best test to find out an imperial force is by a language. So empires are using language to spread their imperial homogeny. So they would, they would go to another country's land, they will colonize the land, and then they would force the local community to speak this language. And that's how, for us to identify empires, we'll look at languages. The reason that I speak English today is because English is an imperial language, and it was promoted through colonialism of other countries, the same way that Spanish is an imperial language and French is an imperial language. And also Arabic. Arabic is another imperial language, and it was promoted through colonizing other lands and forcing the local communities to speak Arabic, or the process that we know today as Arabization. That's why so many Jews from the Middle East and North Africa speak Arabic. There's only one place where Hebrew is being spoken, and it's 0.03% of the Middle East. Israel is not an imperial force, and that's the best test to find it. And I think that's really important when we're having conversation about imperialism and people don't really understand what it means. Just use this test, find which language is being spoken in all those countries, because then you'll find the imperial force that promoted that. So yeah, it's important to say it because people are reversing the whole imperial nation equation, and Israel is a nation state, and the Arab world is an imperial one. That's why we have almost over 30 Arab countries and over 20 Muslim countries in the Middle East. The reason that they look this way, and the reason that minority groups in the Middle East are still not having autonomy and national rights, is because of this imperial power. Other than the Armenians and the Jews, no other indigenous minority to the Middle East ever received autonomy. but yeah, that I'm going back to my story. It was just an important point because I find that a lot of people are confusing it intentionally, and people buy into this idea that Israel is an imperial power, which it's definitely not. And there's no motherland that Israel was created to be an outpost of. Israel is the motherland, and we are not colonizing other countries, and you can't colonize the land that you are indigenous to. And we'll talk about indigeneity later as well, because that's really important. So yeah, I grew up in Petah Tikva, spent most of my life in Israel. And when I was 18, I joined the IDF. And because I spoke Arabic and English, was really enjoyed reading books in English when I grew up. And I don't know, I guess I always looked up to America, to North America, as a place, as a source of inspiration in many ways. And I really enjoyed American and American culture. My sense back then was to watch Saturday Night Live, and that was really the absorbing American culture. I really enjoyed that. And then I was reading a lot of books as well in English, and I think that's what gave me the language skills that I have today. And that's why when I joined the IDF, they assigned me to join the COGAT unit, the Coordinator of Government Activities in the Territories. That's answering your question, Andrea. And it's basically a unit that is responsible for all the humanitarian affairs that are happening in Gaza and in Judea and Samaria, the disputed territories. And I served in Hebron, Ramallah, and Jerusalem periphery, and I served for 5 years. My job was to be in charge of all the humanitarian affairs. So from building roads and infrastructure and hospitals and taking care of emergencies that happen in the field, saving lives of Palestinian and Arab children, and or citizens, civilians. And doing this job was really impactful for me. It made me feel like I was able to make a difference, and as someone that is the son of refugees, my parents came to Israel stateless, and everything they had was taken from them. Really made me feel like I'm able to promote peace. And I did that, as I said, for 5 years. And then after that, I moved to America. I lived in Seattle, and then I also lived in New York for a while. I was doing this work of speaking about Israel, writing about Israel and the Jewish people and anti-Semitism. And it was very interesting to see that, thinking that I'm coming as a son of refugees, as someone that is liberal in his perspectives, supports social justice and equality, I was attacked over and over again, not for everything, not for many layers of my identity, rather than the one layer, which is where I was born and the fact that I was Jewish. And I've done that for over I've done it for 10 years right now, and I'm seeing that the situation is just getting worse. And that's why 3 years ago, I've together with Dr. Ron Katz, a lecturer of rhetoric and propaganda from University of California, Berkeley, we founded the Tel Aviv Institute, which is basically looking at data and social media and trying to fight anti-Semitism online using strategic messaging and using the tools that we have today on social media. And I'm sure all of you saw in recent May, how the conversation around Israel and Jews has shifted dramatically. And we've been really, I feel like the Jewish community has been under attack. I was here in London for the first half of the operation in Gaza against Hamas. And I remember that I saw many people that I considered friends, that knew that I was Israeli, that I'm Jewish, posting horrific things on their social media. Many people that I had to lose as friends because of that, and really showing such disregard to my feelings, to the feelings of the Jewish community, and spreading misinformation without checking it about a conflict that takes place thousands of miles away, that they have nothing to do with. I mean, of course, Britain has a lot to do with it, but other than taking the blame for the acts that have been done in the past, it wasn't. I didn't find it to be okay for them to discuss it in the way that I did. And I think what was more troubling was that when there was violence against Jews happening in the streets of London, those same people that were posting about Israel and about the conflict had nothing to say about violence against Jews in their own country. They still have nothing to say because there's violence against Jews. 20 minutes from where I live, it's Stamford Hill. It's a Haredi neighborhood that almost every week we hear about something else, another violent act. And it's really interesting that people are so outspoken and so emboldened to say things about Israel, but have nothing to say about. There was an envoy of cars calling to rape Jewish women in the streets of London, and no one said anything about that. No one other than the Jewish community. So we realized that we have to try a different way to get people's attention. And what we're doing today is using language that you can look at my social media accounts, or just look up my name on Instagram and on Twitter, and you will find my accounts, and on Facebook as well. And we're using short messaging mostly. The three important rules of social media is that every message you put out there has to be short, has to be entertaining. Entertaining means it doesn't have to be funny, but it can be also sad. It should make people feel something. It should move people, and that it has to be relevant to the audience that you're speaking to. So that will be something that guides us at the Tel Aviv Institute in everything we're doing. The messaging that we're putting on Instagram, an example, is Instagram is a very visual platform. So we're using images, we're using graphics, we're using pictures and text that is fonts that are different. And you can do it on your own Instagram account, but it's we're matching the message to the platform we're using. On Twitter, you'll see on my Twitter that most of the messaging that I'm sending is, all of it is very short, it's very concise, it's to the point, and trying to get people to feel something about what I'm saying. And the same thing on Facebook, which is a platform that combines the two. We're trying to keep our messaging short. So that will be the first important thing. The second thing is to try and meet people where they are. I know that we are, we're not trying to promote Coca-Cola. We're not trying to promote McDonald's. It would be much easier to promote, although it's really, it's not healthy for you. It's much easier to promote a brand or a product that you have no emotional connection to. We are promoting a country that we all care about, that we have strong feelings about it. And a lot of other people have strong feelings about this country too, and about its existence. So it's very hard to do it, but we often say just detach yourself from as much as you can from your feelings about the specific issue that is being raised or that you are discussing, and try and think where this person that you're speaking with is at and how can you change their mind. We want to be effective. We don't want to, and I hear how upsetting it is to see people saying horrific lies, spreading horrific lies about Israel and about Jews. But you should always, and I know that the instinct is to just tell them to go do something else with themselves. But I think that the more effective approach would be to think of how we can change their minds. And that's what we're trying to do at Tel Aviv Institute. We're always trying to change people's minds. And that doesn't only go to sending messages on Facebook or messages to your friends in private. It's also when you're commenting. We find that celebrities and big organizations that have, or big corporates that have social media accounts really take note of the comments that they have in the comment section. So I want to encourage everyone to engage in comment sections when it's relevant to our topics, because it does make a difference. When many people comment on a post, it's really changing the conversation. I find that the comments that are more effective are the ones that are, most people. I want to hope that I'm hoping that most people are not anti-Semitic, and I hope that it's a minority of people that are, and there's just a lot of people that are ignorant. So we always want to make sure that we are catering or we are sending a message that people that are not educated about a specific topic will be able to engage with it, that they will not, that whatever comment you're writing will not alienate people. And that goes back to what I said just earlier, that, the instinct is to just call something out and tell people that they don't know what they're talking about and that they're stupid. But instead, we're trying to find, even if it's not real, even if you're not really interested in having a conversation with a person, just show like you are opening up to them. It will go a long way. And even if this person is not opening up, you're still going to win this argument when you are going to be seen as the one that is more rational. So try and be more rational, try and be more open, and lead with kindness. It's one of the most important things. So we're working with social media influencers and we're training them on messaging around Jews in Israel. We're working with dozens of them. And we always say the most important thing is to lead with kindness. Try and lead with kindness because it goes a long way. And today on social media, where everything is so violent and so aggressive, and people, social media networks are making their bucks because you get upset, because they can upset you. Things that it was shown that and proven that on Facebook and on other platforms, the more reactions, the more different reactions a post create, the more it will be visible to other people. So they want to upset you. And what I'm asking is that try and not get upset and think about how you can make a difference for our community in a positive way, and meet people where they are. Again, it's really important that you're just speaking to people at the place that you're meeting them where they're at. I remember that when we had one of our recent laboratories for social media influencers, one of the participants asked me, we should just tell everyone that we're indigenous to Israel. And that's such an important point. I mean, we should definitely say to everyone that we're indigenous to Israel. But to just tweet Jews are indigenous to Israel doesn't make much sense to most people. Or to tweet something like Rashida Tlaib is an anti-Semite is not going to change people's mind. We need to show them how. So we're saying just don't just say something, show people what you mean. And the example of indigeneity, I had a post on my Instagram just a couple of months ago that I discussed why Jews are indigenous to the land of Israel. And I actually did research and I interviewed Native American activists and spoke to them about the idea of indigeneity. Jews are indigenous to the land of Israel, and being indigenous doesn't mean that you're where your grandparents are from, because if that was the case, many people would be indigenous to America. Being indigenous to a place means where your culture, where your people started as people, and if they maintain the connection to this land, as long as they maintain a connection to the land, then you are indigenous. And that's an important point, because I see this conversation being fired up online, and I find that people aren't really getting the full picture on this. Jews are indigenous people. We're not just indigenous to the land of Israel. We are indigenous people because we maintain relationship with the land of Israel. The way we do it is by praying towards our land every day. It's by remembering Jerusalem, which we do in every wedding, and every time we're praying Shema Israel, the most important prayer, one of the most important prayers in Judaism, that is all about the land. It's a very agrarian religion that the base is Israel. And yes, we also have very similar characteristics in our religion to those of Native Americans. Native Americans invite spirits into their home every Friday. In the same way, we invite the angels of peace every Friday on Kiddush to come and bless us. This is an indigenous practice. Or when we take the 4 species or the 4 plants in Sukkot and wave them to 6 directions of the wind, we're doing it because we are indigenous people. So that's really important for us to recognize that Judaism is Judaism and being Jewish and being part of this tribe also mean that you have your connection to the land. When people lose their indigenous connection to a land, you ask, because I see that for some people it seems like Jews are the one people that our indigenous connection to our land expires, which is completely ridiculous. The only way that you can sever indigenous connection to a land is by stopping or cutting your connection to the land. For Jews, that means to be an anti-Zionist. If you're an anti-Zionist, you're not indigenous to the land of Israel anymore. You're not an indigenous person, and you are basically out of the tribe in this sense. I mean, I'm not saying that Jews that are anti-Zionists are not Jews, but it just means in the sense of indigenous relation to a land. That's an important point. And Yeah, so I guess what my advice for everyone is to engage online in a respectful way, lead with kindness, and meet people where they are. We have to do something to change the conversation on social media. We're doing a lot at Tel Aviv Institute. You can read more at tlvi.org about our work to combat online anti-Semitism. But it's not enough. Of course, it's not enough, and we need more support and more help from everyone. And you can all do it from your home, from going to those big accounts that are having conversations that are relevant, and just engaging respectfully and showing that we want people on our side. We do. We need allies, by the way. And I don't know. I know a lot of people are saying, "Well, we don't need anyone," but we do, because even if we see, and as we're seeing in every generation, their anti-Semitism is not going anywhere. But we should be able to count on other people to stand with us and support us. So I really encourage you to try and create more allyship, to try and create connection with other people. Don't write off people because of disagreement, and lead with kindness. That's the most important thing. That's what we do. That's our value as Jewish people. We're fighting back, but fight back with kindness is the most effective strategy that you can have. And on that note, I know we have like 15 minutes for Q&A or so. So I want to, Andrea or Taylor. Taylor is doing the Q&A, right? Sorry.
Yeah, turn it over to Taylor.
Yeah, wonderful. I mean, Chen, it's so wonderful to hear all the incredible work that you and the Tel Aviv Institute are doing. And as someone that's young and following all of these accounts, it's really empowering. And I'm sure most people in the audience can feel the same. With that being said, there's a lot of dehumanization and a lot of hate that comes with posting and following accounts. And, if someone posts something positive or someone talks about anti-Semitism, they're often met in the comments with, anti-Israel bias or, free Palestine slogans. Is it better to engage in these comments, or if they show up on our pages, what do we do? Should we be blocking them? Should we engage with them? What do you think?
Yeah, that's the greatest debate on social media. It says, do you want to give attention to someone that by commenting you will actually make the post or the conversation more visible to others? So the way we judge it, the way our rule of thumb at the Tel Aviv Institute is that there are two reasons. There's two scenarios where we respond. First scenario is to educate people. So if there's an example of someone saying something ridiculous or something that is so off that you can really prove it wrong, and that it's not too nuanced, that you don't have to go into paragraphs of response, so then it is worth it to address it. Or when someone is being so ridiculous. So people often ask me, why do you engage with Ariel Gold, the anti-Zionist Jewish lady that runs Code Pink, and she's a great fan of mine, not friends, fan or enemy. The line is quite blurry, but she often gets into my comments and she's trying to trigger me. And people ask me, like, why are you responding? And I said, I think that if I had to choose between a professor that can make an intellectual case about why anti-Semitism is okay, and Ariel Gold, she's not very she's not bright, to put it this way, and I find that having her as a representation of anti-Zionism is quite positive for my agenda. So that's why I will engage with people like that, if I can educate others about how ridiculous her argument is, or why she's wrong, and I know I can prove it in a matter of a sentence or two that will not get people to believe their side. So that's the first scenario. The second scenario is if it's someone with a big account. So I often engage with Rashidat Lab and AOC, and actually I get Rashidat Lab to respond to me because we touch the specific issues that we know that she really cares about, and not that she really cares about, but that she wants her constituency, she wants her voters to think that she cares about. So issues like she tweeted something about how Israel is a racist country because Israel would not allow couples to get married if they're from different faith. and that's, of course, it's ridiculous. It has nothing to do with race. It's just I mean, it's a problem still in Israel that the marriage institution is controlled by the rabbinical council, the Islamic Waqf, and the Christian council, I guess, in Israel. They are the only ones that can officially recognize marriage or perform marriage. Sorry, marriage that was performed abroad will be recognized in Israel, and that's how same-sex couples have been doing it for years, and that has been a precedent that LGBTQ activists have worked to change. So I replied to Rashida Tlaib with putting a picture of me and my partner, and I said, hey, Rashida, this is my partner. We are same-sex couple, and my partner is not Jewish. And I don't think you care about our love. I think you don't want me to exist at all. And she responded, of course, with a weak response that we did what we call on Twitter ratio, where I got more likes than our original tweet and our response. And it's often happening. And I get comments sometimes from my friends that see that, and they're like, the fact that Rashida Tlaib is so annoyed by everything you do and she has to respond, which she doesn't respond often at all, almost. But she always engages with me, makes a lot of people laugh. But it's not just laughing; it's just the fact that she gave my response attention, and I won a few arguments with a sitting congresswoman that has massive power. So I do encourage you to engage and comment on people with big accounts and that have power, and policymakers, celebrities, organizations. That you know that said something wrong, and you can change that. So yeah, that would be the two cases that I do recommend to engage. Otherwise, just ignore them. The amount of hate I get and the death threats I get, like, just read someone sending me a direct message saying they'll take me on my back out of London. I mean, ignore this stuff. Don't ignore it. Go to the police if you can. I'm at a point that I can't. If I went to the police on every death threat I'm getting, I would have to visit the police every day. So I'm ignoring it right now, and I'm lifting heavier weight. That's what I do.
Yeah, and I mean, despite the threats that you're getting, it is, as I said before, it's an empowering and I think inspiring to so many people to know that we're not alone in this fight online, which can feel very much like you're the only person often fighting and saying something. And so voices like yours and amplifying them is so incredibly important to have.
Thank you.
There are a lot of questions about how we measure success. With all of that being said, it's online is still relatively new, and this world of social media activism is a newer phenomenon. How do we measure when we're doing something right and getting that momentum going?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, because I see a lot of people thinking that if you have a lot of followers, it means you're doing a good job. And it's not always true. You can have a lot of followers that are all same, like-minded, that are going to just praise you for everything you're doing. And it's good to preach to the choir, as we call it, but I don't know if that's going to change the needle. What we're measuring at the Tel Aviv Institute is engagement, and we want to make sure that every post and every comment or everything that we put out there has positive engagement. And engagement is how many comments and likes and shares you get on a post or on a tweet or whatever you put out there, and if it's positive. So likes are usually positive, but comments can be, if you get a lot of negative comments on a post, it's not a good sign. That means that you get negative engagement. If you get 10% negative engagement and 90% positive, that's really good. You don't have to have thousands of followers or even 1,000 followers or even 100 followers. Even if you have a small amount of followers and or friends or on social media, and you engage with them and you see that the responses that you get are positive by and large, or that you get positive engagement on some of this content that you're putting out there, that means that you're doing a good job. I would say that sometimes on Twitter, at least, there's bots, and we know how to recognize. So that's a bit more advanced, because we know that there are fake accounts out there that are being operated. Some of them operated from Qatar. We found out accounts, like thousands of accounts that are just commenting by when there's a call for action, they immediately go and comment or post or tweet or like something. So that also, I'm saying it with a caveat in regards to Twitter, but on Instagram and Facebook, that's usually the positive engagement is, or negative is quite genuine.
Right. And So with all of that being said, do you think it's more beneficial to remain anonymous online? I know it's probably a bit easier for people on Twitter. I see a lot of people creating different, names for themselves on Twitter to hide behind so that they're not attacked in person or online. Is it better to remain, under a pseudonym, or should we be embracing ourselves to the fullest?
That's a good question. I mean, it's often I often ask you. I'm often thinking. Well, I mean, my advice in general. It depends. It depends like what you do, and I do want to protect our community and people that are. There are people out there that want to destroy people like us or Jews or Zionists because they don't want us to. I mean, and they'll try to cancel us. They'll contact our jobs. We're working with people that had their whole careers destroyed because of comments that they said. Not people we're working with, but people that reach out to us for help. For even if it's not something real that they said. There's people get this one tweet that I wrote like 12 years ago that I made a poor joke. Wasn't really bad. It was just I posted a picture of a terrorist held by a police officer, Israeli female police officer. And I said something about this is what you look like when your girlfriend takes you around the mall or something like it was a poor joke. I apologize for it, deleted the tweet, and 12 years later, it's still been brought up and used against me. So I would say if you're a public figure or if you're, you know what, in general, like it's better to do this job, protecting your identity, maybe use only your first name, maybe don't give identification of where you live or what you do. It's important to protect yourself. And yeah, so that would be my advice to just in general protect yourself. It's really important. I mean, I also know that it gets very tough out there, and I mentioned the death threats, but I also, people send me like my family's address. They found my family address, and that was a bit scary. So yeah, protect your identity is my advice.
And so with protecting our identities, a lot of the hatred that we're seeing now, especially on social media because of COVID, but now that we're back in person slowly, is on college campuses. And it's now also, especially in Toronto recently, has been in day schools, this type of anti-Israel, anti-Zionist hatred and bias that is running really, really rampant in the school system. How can we combat it, especially online with, we have so many different Students for Justice in Palestine clubs that are very hateful. Some, pro-Israel clubs are getting their DMs on Instagram flooded with hate messages from their fellow students. Is there a way that we can combat that specifically?
I find that, I mean, of course, all of the advices all of the points that I made before also stand for engagement as a college student. It's really difficult, I know, I've been on college campuses getting shouted at, and here in London, 300 students barricaded me and a group of Jewish students in a room and didn't let us leave, and we had to be escorted by police. So it gets very violent and terrible. I really have no advice. I think that it's not your job. You're a student. You're not supposed to. You should definitely lead a conversation about what we should do. It's a question that, and I feel like I should send back to you, Taylor, on what do you think that how we can support you best. Because I don't think that us adults need to tell you what to do or how to discuss these issues. You're living on campus. You are the one that should be leading this conversation. And it's really heartbreaking. I spoke to a student yesterday that started a anti-sexual harassment group on our campus in New York. Two students, actually, two female students. And because they shared one of my posts, really non-inflammatory, factual posts about the connection of Jews to the land of Israel, they were bullied out of this group that they founded, that they started. And the president of the university hasn't done anything. Of course, we're helping them. We're working with a few other organizations to support them. But what we tell them, and what I'm returning that to you. It's all about what you need from us. We're we don't have monopoly on, I mean, us as Jewish community, as Jewish leaders within the community, we are listening to what students are saying, and you should lead that. So that's my answer, I guess, to that. And if you want to tell us some of your takes of what you feel like will help you, that would be good.
I mean, first, I think we need, the universities and administration to take action. It's difficult because, at least in Canada, we don't have class action lawsuits like Title VI and in the States where you can take action. But I think, as much support as we possibly can, it's difficult, but knowing that we're not alone and having voices, as I keep saying, but voices like yours are so, so important. Because when we do go online and we see that hate, we then are reminded of our love and our connection to Israel. And I think that is, such an important and necessary way to combat all of this, because there's really, I think, Ben Freeman always says this, but there's no better way to combat Jew hatred than with our pride. And I think having, voices like yours and everyone that's in this room, keep wearing your Magen Davids and, speaking out about this and amplifying Jewish students' voices, because it can be a bit draining and tiring, but, to know that we're not alone is really, really empowering, I think.
Yeah, you're definitely not alone, and you have all of us behind you. So if we can ever support you, I'm sure Andrea also will be there whenever you need us. So you're not alone. To every student listening to us as well.
I want to amplify that, actually, Hen, because there are some organizations, ours and many others, and certainly all the list of the organizations that are co-sponsors are definitely wanting to be behind the students and support students. One of the questions that, following from what Taylor just said, several people have asked, can you give examples of actual messaging that you've used that people could either look at, reframe, or use? It sounds to me like following you would be very helpful, because then people could retweet and restate what you're saying. But maybe you could give us some examples of what you have found to be effective.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of my taglines that actually I just found out was on Times Square. One of the quotes that I put out there is that I promise to love being Jewish 10 times more than anyone hate me for it. And I think that's, for me, is like really the MO of everything I'm doing. I don't want to, because we get so caught up in it, and I spoke to you for 45 minutes about this, and it's really easy to fall into a place of darkness and to think about anti-Semitism as a thing that creates our identity or frames our identity, and it's really not that. There's so much beauty in being Jewish. There's so much joy in being Jewish, and we are, our people, our story, our history is such a unique story, and it's such a story of resilience and overcoming challenges and becoming such a, not just, as we say, not just surviving, but thriving. That's something that we have done continuously throughout centuries. And I think that's really important, that the more they hate us, or the more we feel like people hate us online, the more we are sharing this beauty. And I find that my posts about how beautiful the Jewish community is, and how rich our story is and our history really makes a difference. Sharing my own family story, and everyone can do that. Or sharing friends, if you're not Jewish, sharing stories from friends, from Jewish friends, or from stories about Jews. I found this story about this Yemenite couple that are, I think, over 90, and they've still been together after being refugees and orphans from Yemen coming to Israel, and how they love that Israel saved their lives. And another quote that I think message that worked, that actually ended up as the front page of the Washington Post that I wrote. I mean, I didn't write the article, but I tweeted that being Jewish and alive is a miracle, but it shouldn't be these days. And that's something that I also think is really important to remind people, like, why is being Jewish and alive a miracle in these days? It shouldn't be this way. And I think also reminding people that the Holocaust is not up for debate, that we're not going to even discuss if the Holocaust happened or not, or if the Holocaust is what's happening today. It's not. The Holocaust happened to the Jewish community. This is the story of Jews, and we should be centered because it happened by and large to us, and there's no need to open that. And also reminding people that the Holocaust happened they all want to talk about how today is just like the Holocaust, but no one wants to talk about anti-Semitism, which actually is the reason that the Holocaust happened. So also reminding people that, and yeah, and again, I really I think the most important thing is to be unapologetically Jewish and proud, and speaking about the beauty of the Jewish community, the joy that we have in our people, and not letting anti-Semitism define us, because that's the most dangerous place we can go to. And if we let anti-Semites define what being Jewish is, or making us focus on anti-Semitism as the only thing that we have, rather than so much beauty that our community have and our story has, it's not positive.
I just interject a question here, Taylor, that comes to me from what you're saying about being very positively Jewish, which I love, and unapologetically Zionist. What I don't see, and I believe that Dr. Mordechai Kedar has very often recommended, that we don't come after our enemies, they come after us. And I wonder if you agree with that, with the approach that exists, or whether you would listen to Kedar. So for example, the University of Toronto created Israel Apartheid Week. And his recommendation is, why don't we create Arab Apartheid Week? Why have we never done that? Why do Jews not get aggressive and come back and fight, invert the inversion which has been thrown at us, and take it back? We know there are no gay rights in any Muslim country. We know women are undervalued. We know that there are many more countries that are oppressing their own people, but we never come at the story that from the perspective of attacking, presenting, whatever you want to call it, the truth about others. Do you think that we should or not?
I don't think that it's, personally, that's my take on this. I don't think that it's that it should be something that we should do as a community, to go after others. We definitely should stand up for other minorities. Definitely we should speak up about oppression of LGBTQ folks all over the Middle East. We should fight for LGBTQ rights in our own countries. We should fight for women's rights in Canada, in America, and in the Middle East and North Africa. And we can always, I feel like we're often calling out the hypocrisy of people that say that they care about gay rights, but then don't care about violations in the Middle East. But then I see that some people that are saying that don't really care about LGBTQ rights in their own countries. So we have to walk the walk in this sense. In regards to fighting back with the same way that people are fighting against us, I think when I was in the army, I remember that we were talking a lot about doing every operation in Gaza, that Israel doesn't launch rockets indiscriminately because Hamas is launching rockets indiscriminately. We're doing pinpoint airstrikes and we're targeted airstrike to avoid civilians casualties and avoid collateral damage as much as we can. And I think that's what makes me so proud to be Jewish and Zionist and pro-Israel, because we are not fighting like our enemies. There's a reason that I can say that, and I can be proud to support our people and our cause, because ours is not like others, and there is a moral difference between where we stand and our values. So I want us to continue upholding values of justice and peace and true justice and true peace, which is what we are about. So yeah, but that's maybe if Mordechai Kedar is a scholar, and he might have a different take than I do, but that's just my take.
Thank you. Back to you, Taylor.
With all of this being said, there's a lot of tools out there now that we didn't have access to before because of social media. But, as you were talking about, like, we don't fire rockets, just, indiscriminately, but, the media makes it out to seem as though we do, or at least it does on Instagram feel like that often. Are there tools that youth especially should be using and accessing? Or are there tools out there that we can use to our advantage to help fight anti-Semitism in the digital world?
Yeah, well, every social media platform, and the one that you're not on, just join. And although it will take some time, I'm still trying to figure out TikTok. I'm almost there. I know I'm like one of the old guys on Twitter and on TikTok, sorry, and people are, and the kids are trying to teach me, and it's still hard, but I'm trying, because it's important that we'll be there. It's important that raise our voices. So first of all, join every platform you can and learn how to use it to advance our cause. The second, there are tools like I think the simple ones are Canva. So if you go to canva.com, it's a free online graphic designing platform. You can make nice. That's how I do all of my graphics for. And now I have also graphic designers, but that's how I used to do all of my graphics for social media. You can make like nice fonts, and they have great templates that you can use. So I highly recommend that. And yeah, I think those are like, and the main thing is really to be on social media and read as much as you can and understand the conversation and how you can contribute to it in a positive and meaningful way.
And so despite, all that positivity, with the hate that we do, inevitably, unfortunately get, should we just be blocking them, deleting those messages quickly? Should we, try and file a report with the social media company? Is that worth our time? Does it do anything? Have you had success in doing that if you've ever done that?
So my recommendation with that is to definitely always report when there's something anti-Semitic. You might not get the social media platforms to take serious action against it, but it's important to do it, because the more reports there is about a user, the more likely that they will be banned. And about deleting comments or blocking, I only block when people say like something, that are using vile language or attacking me. I don't block people that disagree with me politically. Like, I can have a conversation with them. But when people go after me like personally or have some, seems like they're constantly trying to attack me, then I block them. So that's my decision. If you block a person, they're not going to be able to learn from you. So that's something I take with me.
Yeah, and that's, I think, something, at least for me, that I wish I had learned before, that it's better to engage or try to engage positively before just blocking someone and cutting the conversation off too short, because it's all too easy to do that on social media now.
Yeah, and you're right. Like, it's easy to do it on social media, and I think that it's just like the whole goal is to change people's minds, right? So although it's hard and we have to bite our tongue sometime, I really recommend to do that. And I think we have time for one more question.
So the last question, there were a few questions in the chat about where anti-Semitism is coming from right now, historically. When the most recent anti-Semitic campaign was the Holocaust, and that was most definitely not coming from the left, but now we see it coming from the left and using terms that were Nazi propaganda. What can we do about that? And this belief that especially comes from the left, where Jews are these white privileged European colonizers that just shouldn't be in Israel, or really at a certain point it seems like we shouldn't be anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, that's a question. Like, if you think that Jews are not indigenous to Israel, so where are we indigenous? Where do we belong? You don't want us in your countries. You don't want us in Israel. You just basically don't want us to exist, and you should say what you really mean. But I think, well, the advice that and it goes back to a lot of things I was talking about. Don't just call out hatred, but educate people. That's what it's about. And I know it's something that we say all the time: educate, but it's really like tweeting that Jews are indigenous to Israel is not going to change anyone's mind. Tweeting that Jews are, as a people, started in Israel. That's why we have indigenous connection to this land. We maintain the indigenous connection to our land, and that's why we are indigenous to Israel. Is going to make a whole lot of difference for people, or to explain why we are indigenous, or to say that. If people say Jews are white, like, to discuss how we are not white and how we all started in Israel. And even if we all started in Judea, that's where we come from. And even if we had not even, because Jews had the longest diaspora out of any minority, indigenous minority. And this long diaspora meant that we lived in countries that were foreign to us, even if it was in Europe. We didn't start in Europe. We didn't come to Europe. We didn't start as people in Europe. It's funny, I mentioned Ariel Gold, this anti-Israel lady, and she, in one of the debates that I had with her, she said actually she found out that she's somewhat Sephardi. So she said that, and I asked, okay, so you're Sephardi, what does that mean? Where are you indigenous to? And then she said, oh, I'm indigenous to Spain. My family came from Spain. And I said, but that's not where the Jewish people started. The Jewish people did not start in Spain, by the way, just putting it on the table. The same way that the Jewish people did not start in Europe, and the Jewish people did not start in Iraq or in Tunisia. We started in Judea, and this is where the Jewish people are maintaining their identity today and are celebrating it. And there's only one place where Hebrew is spoken, and it's in the Middle East, in Israel. That's where we're from. That's where we are reviving our ancient culture, our language, our religion. And there shouldn't be any shame in it. Quite the opposite. We need to keep on saying it, keep on educating people, and truly educate. Again, I really want to emphasize it, like explain to people why they are wrong and give them the tools to come to our side and try and convert, like each and every one of you. We have what, over 200 people. If each and every one of you got 2 anti-Israel or 2 people that were with questionable thoughts about about our community to change their mind and to see things differently, we would be in a so much better place. And then they would change other people's mind. So really, it has a ripple effect. So I really encourage you to not shy away from the conversation. I'm going back to leading in kindness and with positivity, because our light is stronger than any darkness out there. So just keep on shining your light. That's the most important thing. And we will overcome. We always have.
I want to thank you so much, Hen. That was very inspiring. And it's given me lots of ideas. I keep telling people I'm too old to go on social media. I'm not going to do it, but today I have to.
Yes, you have to.
I will. Taylor, thank you for joining us and for handling the questions beautifully. You're both very strong and inspiring to all of us. And thank you everyone for participating. Have a good day. Stay well. Take care. Bye for now.